Vampire the Masquerade Swansong is the latest game set in the World of Darkness series of tabletop RPGs based on the Vampire the Masquerade game. Set in Boston, you control three different characters as they navigate the fallout of a meeting about the reunification of the Hartford and Boston domains, where all the attendees are slaughtered. Desperate to consolidate both her power and prevent an all-out war, the Camarilla Prince tasks the three-player characters with different missions in order to get to the bottom of what happened and who is responsible.
It's gonna be a long night.
Miss Lewis, welcome.
The gameplay is area exploration, some detective puzzles, and talking. Lots and lots of fucking talking. In this manner, Swansong is more of a sequel to the coteries of New York rather than Bloodlines, even though it's a standalone title. Gone are Bloodlines' large map areas and combat, income, political intrigue, choices, and a metric ton of lore.
Who's she, Caleb?
Mem Lewis.
She smiles.
Yes,
like
lore.
Victoria
There's
Doll.
lots of it here. If you're into the tabletop RPG series, you'll be right at home. If not, let's hope you can read fast. The game dumps an absolute shitload of phrases, buzzwords, key events, and characters at you, and you'll want to learn or at least understand most of it in order to get the most out of Swansong. This leads you to either pausing the dialogue scene to look up the codex or waiting till afterwards and hoping that nothing important relating to that item came up that you'll miss. This leads to you not really focusing on the dialogue scenes, what's being said and what's going on, kind of giving the game a disjointed feel. The scenes are all well designed, if small closed sets, that you explore to find clues and advance your understanding of what's happening and maybe unlock some alternate dialogue options.
Do you know what this code red is all about? You're in the Primogen. You must know something.
I'm in the same boat as the rest of you. Apparently, it was from one of Moore's retainers. That's all I know.
Who's that?
Jason Moore. Don't you remember him? He's the human who manages our interests when the sun comes up. He handles our assets, errands with the banks.
What does he have to do with this?
I don't know. It now seems that Miss Hazel Iverson, the mighty Prince of Boston, is no longer on speaking terms with the Primogen. As if now were the ideal time.
Basically, in place of the free-roaming exploration and combat of its predecessors, Big Bad have instead attempted to substitute in the depth of the tabletop RPG. But they've missed out on that as well. The story is nowhere near dense nor compelling enough to make up for this.
Hazel must be upstairs.
The graphics are, quite frankly, substandard. I can only imagine how cheated anybody who bought this for the PS5 or the Series X feels. There's a frankly ridiculous amount of texture popping and some of the animation glitches are frankly embarrassing. The character models are well detailed, but there's zero life to any of them and they're stilted animations. The mocap comes in for particular scrutiny during the game's numerous dialogue scenes. The lip syncing is abysmal, often landing nowhere near what the characters are actually meant to be saying. The game looks like it's set in the Uncanny Valley, not Boston. This is made even worse by some of the worst voice acting I have ever heard. In particular, the voice actor for Halsey seems to occasionally forget if her character has a lisp or not. Despite being given three distinct characters, you can pretty much play all of them the same, with roughly the same special abilities bar one or two, and they're only used in specific circumstances. There's no real attempt to differentiate them from one another, despite one of them being a fucking Malkavian. But we'll get back to her later.
He's my psychiatrist. He's helping me so I can be with you. Mom has a little trouble sometimes, remember? I see things that haven't happened yet, and I forget others.
Yes, I know. And you have to slumber so you can rest all alone sometimes. But 3 years was too long.
It seemed like an eternity without you.
I missed you too, Mom.
I need my sweet little monster.
Mom? What's going on?
All three characters are fundamentally unlikable. MM is stuck up to such an absurd degree that she still hates her sire for disagreeing with her, despite her sire being correct to disagree with her about a particular event, who then wound up saving her life and ended up getting branded for it in the process. Leisha is almost comically infantile and has a child sidekick so annoying it beggars belief, and Caleb is so detached from everything that's happening around him, he always seems to be wondering if he's just left the oven on.
Because grown-ups talk to me too much.
If you want, sweetie. But don't wander off. Go on. Show me what you do to make sure no one spots you.
Okay, here I go.
Speaking of Leisha, if any of these characters represent a wasted potential, and I believe they all do, but it's her. She's a Malkavian with no menace, no edge to her at all. There's no hidden whispering voices, no fourth wall breaking dialogue. In fact, there's no special dialogue for her at all. This is fucking blasphemy. Malkavians are some of the most interesting and warped characters throughout the series, and they've boiled it down to someone with a crap hairdo. In previous games, being a Malkavian allowed you to get into an argument with a stop sign. Leisha just has the odd vision. It's pathetic. A special mention must go in for the feeding mechanic here. They use the term hunting in the game to describe feeding on humans, and nothing could be fucking further from the truth. You don't hunt, you just find a laughably named safe room, walk up behind a specific human, because the game only allows you to feed in certain ones, no reason for this is given, and then you just hold down a button. That's it. The feeding animations are cheap and generic stock scenes, and after a while they just got so annoying, leading to the irony of a vampire game where the feeding mechanic is a complete chore.
Yes.
I suppose the worst thing about the game is the pacing. It's about as structured and as rigid as it's possible to be without being on rails. The game is paced awfully and there's no way to speed it up, as the dialogue takes an age to complete and all of the cutscenes are unskippable, every single one of them. This is made even more egregious due to the fact that it's a single save game with no manual saves, meaning if you make a mistake or fail a section and want to go back, you'll have to replay huge sections of unskippable dialogue. Oh, and fail sections you will, by the way, because you'll have no idea what the fuck you're heading into each one, meaning that you'll be grossly underskilled at every turn, despite all of your characters being elder, high-ranking vampires. Hell, one of them's 300 years old. This gets me onto the skill system, which deserves its own special level of hell. They're so obtuse it'd be almost meaningless. They're also implemented really poorly. One section had me travel to the hideout of another sect of vampires in order to convince them to take part in a counterattack against a heavily armed bunch of vampire hunters who were responsible for the massacre that kicked off the game. In preparation for this, I invested heavily in persuasion skills and my presence discipline, only to find that they're barely fucking used. Rhetoric is, psychology is for some reason, but apparently a supernatural ability to persuade people isn't considered useful in a section where you're trying to persuade people to fight for their fucking lives. This poor skill implementation combines with an incredibly slow progression to leave you never fully comfortable with the gameplay. Adding in the sheer constellation of skills and the fact that you'll never level up enough to be proficient in more than one leads to having to accept that you're going to fail quite a bit in some sections. Now, some would react to this by saying, well, that's realistic, no one's great at everything, and it leads into replayability by offering different avenues to go down on subsequent playthroughs. But my response to this is, I'm playing as a 300-year-old vampire, realism isn't what I'm fucking going for, and this game is so painful to get through, there's not a chance in hell I'm going for a second run of this.
I'd like to hear Abigail's side of the story.
In conclusion, Swansong is a mess on every level. Technically, it's buggy, the graphics are awful, the sound design is terrible, and the gameplay is non-existent. Artistically, the writing is garbage, the story is predictable, and the characters are all painfully dull, and the dialogue is a horrendous cliché stew where so much is said without any relevant information actually being delivered. This game could have been so much better, and it really could have whetted a lot of appetites for the now terminally delayed Bloodlines 2. But there's no game here. There's just boredom.
They can't hurt me.
This can't be happening.
I swear.